Hello, you're watching Breakfast with Rachel Burden and Ben Boulos.
Now, it's probably something few of us have ever thought about. How do you access the contents of a loved one's phone if they die?
But when Martyn Hall from Anglesey lost his wife Lyn unexpectedly earlier this month, he desperately wanted to use some of their wedding photos that were on her phone as part of her funeral service.
Now, sadly, he's been unable to access them because he doesn't know the password and he can't get the phone unlocked because of Apple's strict privacy rules. Our reporter Matthew Richards has the story.
Lyn Hall died suddenly from a brain hemorrhage 3 weeks ago. Her husband Martyn has a few precious photos from their 6-year marriage, but wants to use more which are on her phone during her funeral service next month. He also wants to contact her friends to inform them of her death.
Yeah, so as you can see, it's now just totally locked. iPhone unavailable.
Lyn used a passcode or facial identification to unlock her phone, and Martyn hasn't been able to access her data.
I tried obvious ones, dates of birth, marriage date and things like that, but I knew Lyn was conscious. You always get told, don't make it obvious, don't make it an obvious code. None of it worked. So that wasn't going to be accessible that way. So then it was, I thought, well, the only thing I can do is contact Apple support. And I contacted Apple support, but just got no help from them whatsoever.
Apple says we consider privacy to be a fundamental human right, and our users expect us to help keep their information private and secure at all times. Apple provides options for their loved ones to request access to or delete their Apple ID and the data stored with it. But Martyn says he's been left frustrated in his efforts to deal with the company.
In terms of Apple and the data on the phone, it's just a brick wall. They just, no.
Social media firms recommend nominating a legacy contact, but this needs to be done by the registered customer during their lifetime. Legal experts say there's no automatic right to someone's data after their death, and it can be an important protection.
Unfortunately, we're seeing this more and more regularly as solicitors working in the wills and probate area. The problem is that people make provision for their wills and they make provision for their tangible assets, but they don't think about their digital assets.
Martyn knows he may not be able to access the information he needs in time for Lyn's funeral, but says he wants to raise awareness of the challenges others could face if they don't clarify their wishes before it's too late.
Matthew Richards, the reporter there. We're joined now by tech expert Fevzi Turkalp. Fevzi, I think a lot of people will be surprised at how difficult it is to access a loved one's device if you don't have the password. And poor Martyn, how frustrating for him. It's not necessarily guaranteed he will be able to get into it, is it?
No, it's far from guaranteed. In fact, there is some case law on this. Back in 2019, a woman from London won a 3-year battle against Apple to get hold of her loved ones, pictures of their daughter growing up and so forth. But it took 3 years. So there is case law on this, but Apple are unlikely just to roll over and give it because they do guard people's privacy even after death. And, you know, in some cases, people might not want everything on their phone to be divulged. So it's kind of important for people to say what they want, to make a list of all the accounts that they own when they're alive, the devices that they own, the digital assets that are there on them. If they want them to be accessed, then back them up locally so you take control away from the terms and conditions of these companies, which, by the way, all vary. And even you know, Facebook has different terms than Instagram, even though they're owned by the same company. They all work on a very different basis. And the law in this country, there's no equivalent of intestacy rules where if a person dies without a will, you know, their assets are divided according to rules laid down in law. There isn't anything that's directly equivalent to that for digital assets. So there are problems. I mean, it was mentioned you can sort of register a legacy contact, and also in your will you can give it a go. So in your will, and also don't forget a lasting power of attorney. If a person were not to pass away but were to lose their mental faculties, again, a loved one may want to be able to access certain pictures, which would be even more important if that person has dementia. So you can put it in a lasting power of attorney, you can put it in a will, you can say who you want to deal with this matter. Okay. But for someone in Martyn's position now, maybe he has to think about a solicitor if he really wants to challenge it.
Fevzi, from what you're saying, there are lots of ways of avoiding falling into this situation that Martyn finds himself in. Why do you think more people don't take the opportunity to avoid having this hassle and this heartache that can result from it?
I guess a lot of us think we're immortal and we don't like to think about our demise. And also sometimes these may not be easy things to think about because there's a lot of this stuff out there and, you know, you need to think about, you know, what you want done with it. Some accounts you may want deleted. You know, there may be dating websites, there may be all sorts of things that people have that would either be not relevant or maybe embarrassing. So people have to give it some thought. But I believe we just don't like thinking about it.
I think that's probably true. Is there a sort of one-stop shop service where you can manage all these things so that it's easy then to pass over to someone else in the event of your death?
I think it's very hard to have a guarantee because what you've got is you've got your wishes and English law butting up against the terms and conditions of usually American companies, and those two things can often be in conflict. But as I mentioned, what you can and should do is a will. You should do that anyway. But in your will, list your digital assets, what you want done with them. If you want a different executor to deal with the digital assets than the physical assets, and the lasting power of attorney. That's a central statement of what you want to happen. And I think that that's quite powerful, either in persuading a tech company to release access to the data or to persuade a court to provide a court order. And a lot of these companies, when faced with a court order, will respect it. They want to kind of cover themselves and not later be sued by another party.
It's worth also saying, Fevzi, sorry, that both Apple and Google do have facilities, don't they, within their devices where you can nominate a legacy contact or something they call an inactive account manager. So someone could then potentially get access to these devices once they're actively nominated by the owner.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point there is that's quite right. So there's legacy contacts for Apple, inactive account manager for Google, and all the various Google services. But it's worth noting that it's a good idea. But first of all, you have to do it for all the accounts. There's no single point that's going to cover everything. Although a lot of people have, you know, between Apple and Google, a lot of people have their services there. But even then, what that allows a loved one to do after the death of, say, a spouse is different. In some cases, it allows the data to be shared. In other cases, it allows control of the account. So some social media companies, for example, will memorialize an account and just make it clear, you know, so they'll leave up, say, the Facebook account, but make it clear that that person has passed on.
Right.
But again, it starts with a list of the accounts that you own, a list of the devices that you own, and a list of the digital assets that you want to either preserve or have deleted.
Okay. Yeah, Fevzi, it's a kind of life admin that I think we all avoid doing, but you're right, it's really worthwhile, if only to save the hassle from your loved ones when you do die. Thanks very much. A really useful conversation. Fevzi Turkalp from gadgetdetective.com. May well be something that you decide now to have a conversation with your partner or family about.
Time now for some sport.